Welcome to the fourth episode of the Finimize Podcast. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Will Peck of WisdomTree, who is the head of digital assets, signing in from the US. How are you doing today, Will?
I'm great. How are you, Eddie?
Yeah, perfect. Busy week in the markets with central banks and God knows what, but look forward to getting into it today. So, Will, maybe let's just start with a little bit about your personal background, because we were just speaking off air about the whole digital asset space, mainly in financial institutions, probably didn't even exist 10 years ago. So could you just talk a little bit about how you got started maybe in finance and how you've worked your way up to the head of digital assets at a major player?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at WisdomTree, which is kind of a well-known asset manager, ETF sponsor, and increasingly digital assets player. For the past 8 years. I started in finance just kind of after school and specifically got into kind of fintech and financial services just as I came to understand the space better. During my time at WisdomTree, Bitcoin really came into the fore, and it was something that we increasingly kind of needed to understand how it impacted our business, kind of Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain in general. And I was, one of the people who kind of put their hand up to work on that. And that kind of generated the interest and, the firm seeing how important it would be going forward. So that's how I got my start in it. And it's been a great journey so far.
And maybe a personal question, but how was that really, an emerging technology, traditional, maybe asset manager, ETF provider? How was that kind of initial transition? Was it difficult at the start, or was it one that there was a market opportunity and it made so much sense to go out and pursue it?
Well, one of the things, it's actually people have been talking about it in the US for some time, has been like the idea of a Bitcoin ETF, right? Where you have an ETF that would be kind of giving exposure to underlying Bitcoin, very similar to like an ETF that gives exposure to gold, right? And so when that concept first came to me, this would have been like 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, what? Like I just couldn't even grasp it. And it's funny today. It's like, oh, that's like the most boring concept ever. Of course, it makes sense. But it took like a little bit of time just to get your head around it. Then it's just like you understand it like any other asset class. It's got its, specifically technical challenges in terms of dealing with private keys and the like. So, and it really just took, we're a pretty entrepreneurial shop. We're still founder led, and so people got their heads around it pretty quickly and were willing to be engaging in the space.
No, that's brilliant to hear. So, what is the most exciting thing? Let's just get straight to the point. What is the most exciting thing that you're working on right now?
Yeah, I see everything digital assets at WisdomTree, which covers both crypto as the asset class, but also more interestingly, blockchain as an infrastructure technology for delivering financial services. The most interesting thing that I'm working on is this project, WisdomTree Prime. It's our digital funds initiative, tokenized assets. I see it as a convergence of two trends. The first being ETFs and index investing. So WisdomTree was launched in its form in 2004. ETFs as a category of ways to invest in the markets had $310 billion in assets in it. Today, there's over $9 trillion in ETFs, right? A lot of people who are just coming to the markets today just take it for granted that you invest in ETFs and indexes to get diversified exposure to different asset classes, whether that's, the S&P 500 or whether it's, stocks in Australia or in Taiwan, right? Like that is the way to do that if you're seeking diversification, is to do it through ETFs. So there's lots of reasons that ETFs have been successful. You can point to transparency, liquidity. A big one is standardization. Whereas in the past, people needed to have bespoke financial advisor relationships or things like that to get access to these assets. And ETFs just said anyone with a brokerage account can buy an ETF, and they can own any market and any asset class that can be held in the structure just through that mechanism, which was actually, we take it for granted today, like I said, but actually a revolutionary concept over 15 years ago. So that's one trend. The second trend is really blockchain and crypto, where we've seen, what started the Bitcoin white paper right in 2008, which everyone's familiar with, the development of Ethereum then in 2015, is just a revolution in terms of ways to move value. This idea that you can have people engage together on a peer-to-peer basis, transmit value, instant atomic settlement, is really also a revolutionary idea in how market structure could work. And you've seen that the innovation only continue further with things like Uniswap, decentralized exchanges, these decentralized lending protocols, really a rules-based automated way to deliver financial services, which is just, like I said, revolutionary in terms of how a lot of us engage with, financial institutions. So what WisdomTree's digital assets is doing is really the convergence of these two trends, bringing things like U.S. Treasuries in a new digital fund structure, a 40 Act registered mutual fund that's kind of the highest standard for U.S. mutual funds, delivered through a tokenized wrapper in a way where the share record can be tokenized, which we think over time is going to unlock just immense user experience benefits for customers in terms of how they engage with investments and bringing it closer to other parts of financial services, giving them much more control and bringing this open source internet native way to engage with value to kind of typical financial services. So that's what the digital funds are. And then WisdomTree Prime is really just through your phone, the way to engage with them. It's a new app that allows you to save, spend, invest using these assets. And it's something that we're quite excited about.
Yeah, so just want to unpack that and maybe make that super clear for all our listeners. So this is not a crypto asset. It's a treasury that is blockchain enabled. Does that sound right?
Exactly. That's exactly it, Eddie. It's not make a bet on Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything like that. It's using that same infrastructure technology for basic things like U.S. Treasuries or U.S. equities, things like that.
So what would be the difference of, a short-term treasury ETF versus that of a digital fund? What would be the advantages for an investor? Why would they want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from an investor's perspective, it should really just feel like the best possible user experience. We're not trying to make this to say, oh, you need to have your own MetaMask wallet or, feeling very blockchainy or crypto for that. It should just be, a nice way to kind of go in and purchase assets and then use them in a bit different way that you might have been in the past. So one of the things I referred to in kind of the overall trends is this idea of peer-to-peer exchange of value. So today, if you own a U.S. Treasury ETF, for example, it's really kind of locked into your brokerage account. Like if you want to sell it, you're talking about selling it, waiting 2 days for it to settle. And then if you want to move the value to your Venmo account to send it to a friend or to your checking account to buy something, you're waiting another 5 days for ACH, or you're paying money to kind of have that happen faster, right? It feels very isolated in that account. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can actually have it feel much more natively peer-to-peer, where you can have this fund token that you can send to somebody else. You could connect a debit card closer to it, for example, that could allow you to keep your savings in vehicles like this short-term treasury vehicle, and have a debit card more directly connected to it. So it's this convergence of the payments tech stack and the investing tech stack, which is quite new and different with this technology. So it seems like somebody's like, well, why would I ever want to buy an asset with an S&P 500 fund? I agree. It's that's a niche kind of use case. What's not a niche use case today is where interest rates in the U.S. are at 4.5%. And a lot of people are sitting in savings and checking accounts that's paying them nothing, right? That's where there's real opportunity here if you can connect that investing side of the house with the payments, savings, spending side of the house, if that makes sense.
Yeah, really interesting. So the Prime app, is this investing, saving, spending? Is this like looking to become, it's got everything? Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, right? I think the goal is to have it to be kind of this financial hub, but we've got to earn that business over time. We're just launching it now. And really right now, the aim is for it to be a very curated investing experience. We're not going to be a place that you can kind of YOLO it into like Dogecoin or anything like that, but it's more about a curated set of assets, whether it's this kind of basic treasury fund, whether it's a U.S. equity fund, whether it's other kind of proprietary WisdomTree IP, that you can come in and then know that I can make choices here and I'm not going to be able to go wrong, I think. And that could include crypto, right? That includes Bitcoin or Ether as well too. And then having that connected in kind of a better user experience with other parts of your financial life. So this cash management piece is, I think, something that's going to be super relevant now, where rates are where they are and inflation's still doing what it is. So Over time, we hope to compete to kind of win more and more wallet share, but we know you need to earn that, and that's what our intention is to do.
Yeah, it's really so it's about user experience and really, yeah, like you mentioned, that tech stack and making it super easy and seamless to save, invest, and use that. So how is this Prime app different maybe from other market offerings, would you say? Like what's your kind of competitive advantage perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll answer it in the way I would to not necessarily a customer, but to someone like you would be, it's the infrastructure behind the scenes where
Hmm.
we've built, a lot of people talk about this with fintech apps today where they're a great front end, but they're really just all the old pipes and things behind the scenes. And every once in a while that kind of rears its head, like with the GameStop Robinhood example, where people were like, wait, like what's happening? Like this is how the markets work? Like I thought it was like a big funfetti thing. And you kind of realize that it's still just a great front end, but on top of really legacy antiquated systems in a lot of ways. And some of these market systems are like still using like COBOL, like they're quite old. It's not true. It may feel electronic money, but it's not like true digital money. And so the way that we're different is kind of building in this truly digitally native way, using blockchain. But we don't need to talk about blockchain. It's really just about that new infrastructure that we think should improve a user experience when they're engaging with their day-to-day financial services. So, for WisdomTree, I talk a lot about blockchain, kind of a nerd, get into that. But for a customer, that really shouldn't be how they engage with it. It should really just be about what does this do for me today, which could be, am I getting a better investing experience? And then am I getting a better kind of savings payments experience as we layer in those features?
And where do you see the most demand for this type of thing? So WisdomTree, it's beast, 88 billion assets under management, tons of different ETF offerings. Is it mainly institutional or is it more focused towards retail, particularly in Europe? ETFs and European saving plans and all these things are a massive growing opportunity for the likes of BlackRock, iShares, etc. So who are the main end users of this, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, so WisdomTree Prime is a retail product, and right now we're targeting kind of tech confident, self-directed investors. So people who are comfortable with a new experience, comfortable going mobile first, and self-directed in the regards that they're looking to make some choices within an experience like this. Also, some interesting other targets. So actually, one of our first products is a tokenized gold. So physically gold bars that have been tokenized, and there's actually a large universe of people in the U.S. who, you call them gold bugs or whatever, but people who, with a lot of good reasons, can think of gold as a great holding and might want to hold it better. So, right now Prime is just available in the U.S. So those are the types of targets that we're having. Kind of more broadly, we think there's lots of institutional use cases for tokenized assets, digital funds like this. And that's absolutely a focus for the firm. But, WisdomTree Prime itself is really targeting, day-to-day investors who are looking for a better user experience in how they're saving spending. And I think that cash management use case is going to be one that's particularly relevant now, like I said, where rates are where they are.
So gold's going to become digital gold, not just Bitcoin, but actually digital gold, right?
Exactly. I love the analogy of whenever somebody's like, oh, why should I invest in Bitcoin? It's like, well, is like gold worthwhile, right? The one thing gold has on Bitcoin is thousands of years of human history of using it as money. But there's lots of other things that kind of Bitcoin does well. Anyway, we're not trying to pick favorites here. We're trying to give choice to people to allow them to hold and own assets in the way that they want to, right? If you love gold, well, that's great. You should have the best experience possible owning gold. The same thing with Bitcoin. And then you should know that we're not going to betray you or lend out your money or anything like that, which is a shame that that's been such a problem for a lot of customers recently where they thought their apps were doing one thing. Turns out they weren't. They were doing something else. So, I think digital gold was kind of always funny. We've debated that term internally just because people are like, oh, you're talking about Bitcoin, right? It's like, well, no, it is gold that's digitized. But that's precisely right, Eddie.
Yeah. And just to touch upon last year, because it was an extremely volatile year for the whole space, both in VC, the assets. Obviously, we have to talk about FTX or at least mention it. How much, what were your key takeaways from this? It was a very bad actor, in a space that was meant to be decentralized. What were your key takeaways? And does this actually strengthen the case for institutional adoption in the sense of increasing the need for regulatory, scrutiny on the space, but also key players that build trust? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? What were your kind of key learnings from last year, and what are you taking forward into this year in the sense of, because you're so involved in the development of this kind of product and the end user as well?
Yeah, I think the things you said were exactly right. I mean, crypto companies failed, crypto and blockchain did not fail, right? And it's kind of, there's lots of things that went into that. There was certainly market froth. There was certainly, kind of some people misleading advertising where they're saying, hey, get like a safe yield on a US stable coin. And by the way, we've got FDIC insurance over here that's not connected to it, that, just led to real problems where customers got into something that they didn't understand. And then these firms compounded that by just having terrible risk management. And I'm setting aside even the fraud of like FTX, but like there were firms that just, were giving out these gigantic uncollateralized loans to one hedge fund at the middle of all this, and then you get it all in the sunlight, and it's just everyone's like, this is crazy. Like, so I think, and it's a shame because a lot of people look at this now and they're like, oh, Bitcoin broke or blockchain broke, and that's just really not the case. There's it wasn't an issue with like, blockchains. There wasn't a technical issue. It wasn't a 51% attack or anything like that. It was kind of shady backroom dealings combined with fraud in some instances. So I try and help people understand that, and for us, it's an opportunity as a wisdom tree, and none of our competitors or other regulated financial institutions are slowing down whatsoever, because there's clearly advantages to this technology, and people are looking for trusted counterparties to deal with, and we think we can be one of those counterparts. We want to win that business and earn that respect from people, and that requires doing things the right way. And hopefully kind of smart regulation can help unlock that for people and give them more confidence.
And how much of this needs to be led by education as well about the space, and maybe demystifying some of the things just like you just did and like I just mentioned? How does education fit into all of this? Because I see you write lots of blogs and research. How important is that?
It's incredibly important. I mean, WisdomTree as a business, we're a research-led shop. We want to be helping people understand what they're investing in. We want the experience for them coming in to be as good as it is going out. And that type of transparency is just a core tenet of the firm, like WisdomTree as the firm, and really the ETF industry. And we think it should be of the digital assets industry going forward as well. So transparency, education is just of utmost importance. But you also can't you can't let these companies off the hook just because they said, they had fine print in one backspace of something. It's like, oh, we educated. Like, people should be doing things the right way and better. And I think it was easy to see how some of these things were being misleading and stuff like that. So, I think companies need to be transparent about it, do the best they can in terms of educating customers, but also, take responsibility in terms of having a good product.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Let's transition into like market conditions, and obviously we've had a pretty tasty start to the year just in general for crypto assets, mainly a function of, I guess, the soft landing narrative being pulled forward, rates slowing down in the sense of going up at a slower pace, and maybe we top out at 5 or thereabouts. What's your outlook just generally for the digital asset space? Maybe we can focus on Bitcoin and Ethereum just because they're the most well known, but maybe some other kind of observations or exciting things that you're looking at this year, and yeah, just your general outlook on the space.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's going to be a function of risk on, risk off. Interesting Fed meeting yesterday. I think I even was kind of used to say, oh, Bitcoin's got lots of characteristics that over time can make it more of a risk-off asset. That was wrong. Bitcoin is clearly a risk-on, asset these days, and let's just own it and accept what it is, right? So maybe in 15 years it'll be something different, but I think a lot of Bitcoin and Ethereum is just going to be a function of, what's going on in the overall macro conditions. Is the Fed starting to ease? tightening or loosening conditions around the world. So right now it seems like, maybe the soft landing is like actually in play. But we'll need to see kind of how things evolve. Our house call at the beginning of this year was there would be a recession this year, at least a mild recession. But look, hopefully, we're wrong on that, and it's not so bad. And even if it is, I think you can look at how much Bitcoin has come back, how much the U.S. equity and other global markets have come back, and said, even if there is a recession in the future, we've actually already been through kind of a little bit of a bear market, and there's a lot of room for upside this year. It's also starting to be true around the world, where international, speaking from a U.S. perspective, so international has been ripping, which we actually haven't seen in a long time. And people were starting to question, what's the value of diversification? Should I just be in like a NASDAQ 100 fund? And, maybe we're starting to see that again. And I think that's going to be something that's interesting to track going forward. So a long way of answering, I think tough to make short-term market calls on Bitcoin and Ether because, somebody like does something in one part of the world and who knows. But if conditions kind of continue to ease, I think you could see these assets going up. And at least it doesn't feel like they're going anywhere, right? Like no one is saying, oh, I'm no longer going to like touch these things, or at least fewer people are saying that. So I think they'd be well positioned if kind of conditions continue to reflect well for risk-on assets.
And you're the perfect person to kind of answer this type of thing. How are institutions, given last year now, resurgence this year, how are institutions approaching this? Are the ones that has done so much deep work and it's still very, very interested? Have some people been slightly put off and been like, okay, that was interesting. The blockchain's interesting. Crypto was super volatile next year. Let's just wait and see for the next maybe 2 to 3 years to let this settle. What are some of the conversations that you've been having with the big institutions?
I think there's a little bit of a flight to quality, whereas, things like Bitcoin and Ether, I think, are fairly well understood. There's kind of another kind of category. If you did market cap rankings below that, we've got a taxonomy that we publish around how to think about crypto, digital assets in space, different categories. So I think there will be a little bit of a flight to quality where institutions they don't want to be, in like a Terra Luna or like an FTX. And that was definitely the case before. And I think you've seen it more now where people really need to know what they own. I think there will be over time kind of a culling of a lot of these, random meme tokens and small projects and that's probably healthy. But we're certainly seeing a lot of interest in institutions in terms of Bitcoin, Ether, and then kind of the space more broadly. I mean, 2 years ago, like I said, was not many people called head of digital assets at big financial institutions, and then today there are a lot of them. And I think as regulatory clarity picks up, I think Bitcoin and Ether will feel like all other asset classes do in terms of institutional adoption. I don't think that's necessarily so far away.
Yeah, I asked that mainly from the perspective of institutional adoption is obviously one of the biggest bull cases, let's say, or drivers of that bull case for Bitcoin. So obviously it's incredibly important.
And I sometimes find that funny where, you have the crypto Twitter bros who are like, oh, like now big bank X is supporting custody for Bitcoin. It's like, guys, come on. Like, wasn't this supposed to be about getting around the big banks? But I don't know, people look for the catalyst. But no, I think it's going to continue to come. I think there's still stuff in the news today, whether it's questions about GBTC and kind of that situation, if there's going to be unloading of Bitcoin there. But, we try and take a long-term asset allocators type perspective. And there's certainly a lot you can see that, Bitcoin, Ether, crypto can add value in a portfolio. Keyword there being in a portfolio. We don't recommend, like I said, YOLOing it into tokens and putting too much of your net worth into these. But if you're able to, have an allocation and stick with it, you can certainly do a lot of math on kind of the portfolio benefits of that. And so that's what we try and help our clients understand.
Yeah, and for everyone kind of listening that are, retail investors, usually very smart, looking to structure their portfolio maybe for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. Of course, it depends on their situation, their income, etc. How do you think about portfolio allocation maybe as the last point in the sense of how much should do you feel comfortable having in a portfolio? Does it act as a diversifier, or obviously we're seeing a lot of demand for alts, alternative investments generally. Do you think of it in that same space, or how do you think of it in a portfolio construction context?
Yeah, it's a great question. I need to be careful about giving precise recommendations or
Absolutely.
something in a situation like this, but certainly, yeah, I think alternatives is a great analogy, and I think you can look at correlations generally. It's not to say, like I said, that Bitcoin is not correlated with kind of the growth side of the market. I think it certainly is, and might continue to be so. Hopefully, over time that'll drop, but with post-crisis, 2008 crisis, correlations across assets have been increasing. So if you're looking at portfolio construction theory, you want to look at things that, maybe have a different risk return profile than other parts of your portfolio, which I think crypto does fit in that, especially if you think about it as kind of like a liquid venture style idea where most retail investors are just not going to get access to, whatever Silicon Valley, Santo Road, VC fund, but anyone can buy, like a Bitcoin or Ether today. That in and of itself can kind of add benefits to a portfolio. So, and it doesn't take a lot. So I guess not just directly answering the question, but like even if you're looking at like 1 to 2% of a portfolio, does that improve Sharpe ratios by owning crypto? And some of the research we've done in the past is like, yes, it does. I think that's something that worth people continuing to dig in. You can go to wisdomtree.com or wisdomtree.eu and get our research there. And that's definitely something we want to help people understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, I put you on the spot a little bit there, but just a general.
It was a very fair question. I asked for it.
So just to end this, it's been incredibly interesting. I've learned a lot myself, so this is always a good thing. What are you most kind of excited about, let's say over the next 3 to 5 years in the space that you're in with digital funds, the innovation behind that? In 5 years' time, where do you hope the space is? Basically, where do you hope you are and the space is, and if that's a success, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're excited. We're launching WisdomTree Prime in Q2 of this year in the US App Store, so it'll be great to kind of, expand from our initial beta testers to a broader audience. So that's a big, personal team milestone for us. In 5 years' time, I think one term I didn't use on this call that's come up a lot recently in crypto is this real-world asset tokenization. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that over the next 5 years. And that'll be some, whether that's things like USDC and some of these stable coins getting used in use cases outside of just crypto, or crypto trading, as you might call it today, to a lot of, institutions kind of using this technology to hopefully give people more transparency, control over their financial lives. And hopefully, I think a key step in that will be, can they do it in a way that it doesn't feel like crypto? I think, engaging with wallets, crypto, things like that can be scary for a lot of people, very understandably. And I think it's incumbent on firms like WisdomTree and our competitors to try and improve that user experience. So for people, it just does what they hope it does. So that doesn't quite answer your question, but that's something I'm really hoping to see come out over the next 5 years.
Perfect. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I'm sure our listeners will be peppering our analysts with questions. And where can everyone find you if they're looking to learn more about yourself or WisdomTree? Yeah,
I'm on Twitter at WBPeck. You can also check us out at WisdomTreePrime.com. Sign up for the waitlist there. And that'll help you from there. You can get to our European or US ETF websites where we've got a lot of great content and research as well. So at WBPeck and WisdomTreePrime.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks a lot, Eddie.
Thanks a lot.